wall guy like Austin.
AJ, I was on that HubSpot call, but I had just done cryotherapy. I was telling Asid, and at first it gave me energy, and then it just knocked me out. And I'm in a hotel room for this Road to Nashville thing that we're doing, and so I put it on speaker. I put the HubSpot speaker call on speaker, and then I like rest my eyes, and then I wake up and all I hear is somebody being like, Denise, turn on mute, Denise. And it was this other woman that was just on a 200-person conference
What
call.
an amazing situation that was. For all of you that are listening, because this is where we're starting the conversation. So, HubSpot inbound, all of the speakers. Reese Witherspoon was on the call. Okay, she wasn't on the call.
Derek Jeter was on the call.
Derek Jeter. They're all
Obama
speaking
was on
inbound.
the call.
They're all
Kim
speaking
Kardashian.
inbound. And this woman, Denise, I don't think that was her name, but that's where we're going with Sam. The Denise. There was like, at the beginning of the Zoom calls, there's like this, like, please mute your calls, and people kind of figure it out. In the middle of the call, unmutes. We hear someone talking, this woman, Denise. She goes, yeah, I'm just on this fucking dumb call. This is just this dumb call that I have to be on. And everyone's like, wow, mute. Someone figure out how to mute this person. Please do it right now. This is awkward.
This is Top Line.
This month's sponsor is Closed, the industry leader in win-loss analysis. The only thing worse than missing quota is not knowing why. Win-loss analysis with Closed provides detailed and unbiased feedback directly from your buyers. So when you're looking for answers, you'll have the concrete data-driven solutions you need to make the strategic decisions with confidence. If you're curious about how win-loss analysis can boost your win rate, give Closed a try. We'll do a free buyer interview for one of your deals. Visit freebuyerinterview.com now to claim your free interview. That's freebuyerinterview.com now to claim your free interview. All right. Well, how is everybody? We'll ask how everybody's doing, and then we'll bring in our special guest. Asid, how are you?
Good. I work is good. I slept decently. I worked out earlier today, so I feel really, really good. So no complaints.
When are you going to Italy?
Next week, Wednesday. Well, Thursday is when I fly, but Wednesday is my last day at work. And I'm feeling
like an episode while you're in Italy? What are we doing?
I'm doing 3 episodes when I'm in Italy.
He's going to be in Italy for 3 weeks.
How do you take that? Okay, can we just have like a full Top Line episode to how you take 3 weeks off?
I love how last week you guys are like, don't be anxious. This is how you can do it. Now you're like, what the fuck are you doing?
It seems like it's very, I can't even, I was going to joke about your mom recovering from her illness, but I just felt like, I was going to say it's very selfish of her to recover so quickly. The only reason
my cousin getting married, my mom recovering.
Yeah. So, man, AJ, are you okay?
I'm doing none of the things Asid's doing. I'm not sleeping as well. But here's I'm doing well because Asid has prepared a great docket today. I'm so excited about it, and we have a great guest today. So like, life is good, Sam. Life is good. How about you? Your Restore. Tell us about the Restore experience.
It was pretty good. It was really low. Like it does. You just walk in and you just fill out a bunch of forms, and then they walk you literally, and then you get naked, and all these people come in while you're undressing, and they sort of inspect you and look at you, and that was weird.
That's not true. You're wearing a mask during this time.
No, I think even stranger. That isn't true. That isn't true. No, but you go behind a curtain and you put on socks and you put on gloves and you put on a hat and you put on a little nose mask and you do get into your underwear and then you put on a robe and then you go with this guy and he's like, this is the cold room and the very cold room. So you start off in the cold room and you take off your robe and then he's like, do you want to listen to some music? So I put on cut copy and then you go into the very cold room. And you're in there for 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And at first, that's the first one. And then you go up to 3 and then 3:15. And then at first you're like, this is easy. And then by the time it's like 20 seconds left, you're like, I think I'll make it. I'll definitely make it to the next 20 seconds. And then afterwards you're like, is the healing happening? Is my leg feeling better? I can't tell if my leg's feeling better. Maybe I should go for a run on it, even if the doctor said no. And then I came back checked into my hotel and fell asleep. And here I am.
Well, I've got news for you. You've extended your life by 20 seconds.
Yeah, let's Go. Let's go. All right. We've got a guest today. I want to bring him in. He's probably been waiting. All right. Doug, you there?
I am. Hey, guys.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Welcome, everybody. We've got Doug Campbelljohn, the founder and CEO of Airspeed, on Top Line, and we're really excited about it. Doug, I'm going to introduce you, and then we're going to dive in, and we're going to learn a little bit about you, but we also expect you to participate in our sophomore banter. So today on the show, we've got Doug Campbelljohn, founder and CEO of Airspeed, over 2 decades of experience in the tech industry. He's held leadership roles at some of the world's most innovative companies, including LinkedIn, Microsoft, and Salesforce. A seasoned entrepreneur, startup advisor, and investor with a passion for leveraging technology to drive innovation and improves people's lives. Join us as we chat with, I'm reading from your one sheet. Join us as we chat with Doug about his journey, the latest trends in the tech industry, and his insights on entrepreneurship and leadership. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited. So, tell us, what is Airspeed? Before we want to know, we want the listeners to know about your amazing company, and then we're going to dive in.
Sounds good. So Airspeed's on a mission to help employees feel more connected and appreciated. And the way we've gone about doing that is by releasing a family of Slack apps this year. So we have 6 that are really meant to capture all these different moments, micro moments of culture. Everything from how do you introduce yourself to a team? How do you see where people are maybe for local meetups? How do you give recognition in a really meaningful way? How do you make sure you're not missing important milestones like work anniversaries? How do you meet up? How do you kind of facilitate meetups with people you might not meet with on a regular basis? And even how do you kick off a meeting and find out a little bit about something in 5 or 10 minutes about the people you're working with?
That's awesome. Well, and how long have you been doing it? Give us a little bit. I mean, I glossed over because I had the one sheet from your assistant, but I didn't have like the full experience. I touched on the fact that you worked on LinkedIn, but I didn't mention the critical capacity in which you helped build one of the world's most important products, at least for go-to-market teams. And I didn't talk really about what you did at Salesforce. So give us a little bit about your career trajectory, and then we can talk about Airspeed.
Sure. Career trajectory has been mostly about working with fun people on interesting shit. That's been the common theme. So my last company was acquired by LinkedIn in 2015, and we were acquired by the Sales Navigator team. Sales Navigator at that time was about $250 million business. It's now over $1 billion business. And so I spent about 4 years there really trying to transform that product into something that was even more mission critical than it already was. I think we did a pretty decent job on that, and really proud of the team that I had working with me then, and then the ones that took over after I left. I left because I was kind of getting bored and didn't have a startup idea in my head yet. And Salesforce came calling and said, "How'd you like to be general manager of Sales Cloud?" I said, "Well, that sounds pretty interesting." And I think there's a few things that are broken with Sales Cloud we can go fix. And I started in February of 2020. So 6 weeks later, the world looked like this. And I hadn't met most of my team. And on the one hand, I loved it. Never want to go back to an office 5 days a week ever again. But I like people, right? And so I like, how do I get to know the people I'm working with? And we tried all the same shit that everybody else tried. We tried Zoom happy hours and, goat yoga or whatever it was. And, lots of Slack channels, lots of all hand meetings. And in the process of going through this over a few months, I realized this stuff is scattered all over the place. There's no system of record for culture. There's no operating system. And so that's kind of what we set out to do at Airspeed. We didn't get it right at first, like many startups. Like we thought the answer was a brand new mobile app and a brand new web experience that people are going to spend all their time in. And we launched that at the end of 22. And after getting smacked in the forehead with a baseball bat about 50 times and people going, "Dummy, like we live on our laptops, we live in Slack." We said, "Okay, let's go fix this." And so we did. And so far the results have been amazing. We just launched our first app in March. Last one just a couple of weeks ago. We'll soon cross over 100,000 users and well over 1,000 companies using the product so far.
Doug, did you join LinkedIn prior to the Microsoft acquisition?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard Jeff Weiner talk once. It was just a really interesting conversation, just talk about that like acquisition. And I'm guessing you were there post acquisition a little bit, but he talked about when the acquisition happened and how Jeff, I guess, was like, I don't know, there was the head of the merger itself, which was like a unique thing. And a lot of this felt like it was a cultural driven situation as a part of it. So I think that would be interesting if any anecdotes or stories just about that, because it feels like that's like a, something that like culturally you've been part of these amazing companies and seen lots of different things, but it's usually like the transitions and like how two cultures like Microsoft and LinkedIn merge. How does that even happen, and what does that even look like afterwards?
Yeah, it's interesting because I went from, we were operating at startup pace and I went to LinkedIn, and it felt like going in molasses because just big company. Like it felt like we were going at quarter speed. And I was actually down in Costa Rica with my family for my mom's 75th birthday. And I got the call like, hey, by the way, tomorrow you're going to read in the news, we're getting acquired by Microsoft. And I was like, oh shit, that's just going to slow everything down way, way more. And to Satya and Jeff's credit, they just fucking rocked that. I mean, like they did it right. So they actually, Microsoft has had lots of acquisitions and screwed up a lot of them in the past. And they didn't with LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn will go down in history as one of the most successful acquisitions that's ever been done. And part of that was because Satya went to Jeff and said, you've got a good thing going. We don't want to screw it up. Why don't you be in charge of the acquisition? And the operating principle we're going to go on is ask not what you can do for Microsoft, ask what you can do for LinkedIn. And that got tested multiple times. I mean, I even had a situation where a very large consulting firm, who shall not be named, came in and wanted to get Sales Navigator as part of their 80% discount, package they had with Microsoft, and went all the way up to Jeff and Satya. And Satya just said, I'll do whatever Jeff wants to do. And Jeff said, we've never, gone off our pricing sheet for Sales Navigator. It is what it is. And that was like one of those many, and there are many moments like that, but there were, so many tests of that. And I think it's, as I used to say, except for the fact that my stock now says Microsoft and I have to use, Office instead of Google, and I can get you a good discount on Xboxes, like nothing else has changed. Like we still had our LinkedIn emails. We still had to badge into Microsoft as visitors, the whole thing. So they did it right.
That's super interesting.
Fascinating that, and I also just remember Jeff saying like, this is maybe more on the IPO, but like a lot from a cultural standpoint, there were things like saying what their numbers were on every Friday. And then like, obviously general counsel was like, no, you can't do that. We're a public company now. Like, no, we're figure it out. We're doing it.
And we trust people. I mean, I'd say that one of the biggest takeaways, and Jeff's a phenomenal leader. Ryan Roslansky, who took over for him when Jeff moved on, is also fantastic. One of the great lessons as a startup founder going into a large organization was watching how deliberate that team was at cascading communications. Like it was a very deliberate motion of like, this is what our goals are going to be. This is what we want to communicate to the executive, to the core leadership team, to the extended leadership team, to all employees. They do bi-monthly all hands. There's always a Q&A at the end. And you were just repeating these messages because in an organization of any size, especially when you get to 10,000 plus, you just have to keep hammering stuff multiple times for people to be able to say, oh yeah, this is our mission, this is our vision, this is what our goals are for the quarter or the year.
Well, LinkedIn's a great company. I spend a lot of money on LinkedIn, obviously, as a recruitment agency. Why haven't they fixed their inbox? Like, don't they get enough complaints about that? Like, what's that?
Doug, you are we've reached the help center for LinkedIn. Your valuable time.
I see a post every single week on LinkedIn about somebody talking about that. Like, it's wild.
What's wrong with it? I use it I think it's fine. What's the problem?
So I think there's a couple things, and what you've actually seen if you look at in kind of the core LinkedIn product as opposed to the premium products, you actually see in the messaging tab now that there's kind of like they're separating things into kind of active and other, so they're trying to kind of filter some of the stuff. I think part of it is, and we try to do things in Sales Navigator. I mean, you can't stop stupid, but you can try to guide people to better behavior. So what we would try to say is like, hey, we came up with in Sales Navigator in mail, here's some set of icebreakers. And we did all this research because LinkedIn loves its analytics. about like, hey, listen, if you can actually, personalize this and find some common ground, it's going to be much more interesting. We even did something, I don't know if they ever shipped it, which was like almost like a warning, like you've just connected and now you're trying to send an email like, hey buddy, why don't you back off for a few days and like, let this settle and then maybe you can follow up later. So there's a bunch of those things that happen. We actually had built a relationship manager product that, again, I don't think is shipped yet, so I probably shouldn't talk about it, but I'll talk about it anyway. But it was the idea of like, hey, listen, here's my book of business. Here is my internal team. What's the overlap with my book of business or my pipeline? Show me who can get warm intros, because that's much more interesting for me to say, hey, I want to get to Sam and I'm connected to AJ rather than a cold, reach in. So I think, LinkedIn's trying to leverage the network in ways that protect people's privacy, but hopefully have better behavior. But yeah, there's still spamminess that happens just by the nature of the network.
I think LinkedIn has done a pretty incredible job, to your point, Doug, because it feels more relevant today. And there was this whole movement when Twitter was ascendant and all the VCs, there's a lot of sort of dickish, very rich, kind of like elite investor types that think LinkedIn is a joke. And, all of the discourse happens on Twitter. And what I've found is that LinkedIn has been Pavilion is built on LinkedIn effectively. Effectively, we are a subset, as many companies are. So kudos to you for your leadership there, because I think it's a really incredible company. And to the point, I think they've executed incredibly well, even post the acquisition with Microsoft. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember the early days, remember when Facebook was ascendant and Twitter was ascendant, it's like, oh, LinkedIn's going to go away. And I was even, I can't remember the name of the company, but it was built on top of, they were trying to build basically LinkedIn on top of Facebook, and that blew up. So, LinkedIn has weathered many storms, and it's not turned into a cesspool.
I don't think so at all. And I think it's actually, it's positive. That's the way to get engagement and to get followers is to teach people stuff. And even if it's a little self-help, and even if it's like, well, what's the credibility behind this person? I still think the reality is it's better than everybody yelling at each other, which is what happens on X or whatever.
Yeah.
Sam's trying to get invited to LinkedIn's headquarters to be
I'm trying to be best friends with nobody.
And so that Austin can come in and say, fix your fucking inbox.
Please. I'm dying.
Let's move. Asa puts together our docket. And so, Asa, we want to talk about culture, because your business, Airspeed, is focused on, I guess, memorializing culture, helping drive better culture. Asa, kick us off.
Doug, I was listening to a podcast you did with a friend, Christopher Lockhead, last night, and you had this really interesting line in there. You said, I wanted to go from building products to building culture. And we wanted to start there because a couple of episodes ago, we were having a debate amongst ourselves around culture. We had taken Brian Halligan's article on 20 lessons as a CEO, and one of them was that culture is your second product. And AJ agrees, I disagree. My point of view was that 90% of culture is the performance of the business, who you hire, and the conversations people have amongst each other. The most important conversations are manager and rep. And if the business is not performing well, then it's really, when you survey that same organization in 2021, when the market was hot, culture's great, market's not hot, culture's down. Like, it has so much to do with performance. And so that's 90% of it. And then there's this 5-10% other bucket that we spend a lot of time on. But is that the thing that drives culture? Is this question mark in the air? And so I guess a jumping off point is you're trying to help companies build that culture or improve that culture. How do you define culture?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, culture to me is not words on a plaque. It's not like, here's our 12 principles handed down. When I do I care enough about this that I've done for my last 2 companies. I've done the new employee sit down one-on-one and talk about our culture. And the example I use is Enron used to have in their lobby their values, and one of them was integrity. So obviously it's bullshit, right? Culture. The one thing you've got right is culture starts and stops with the people you hire and fire, right? So it's not like you can say, here's our culture and hire completely different people, right? Culture ultimately stems from, the people that you're bringing on. But culture to me is a set of operating principles by which you can make decisions. So if you're like, hey, listen, like that person just took an action that just doesn't mesh with who we are as a company, then if you leave that person in the company, you basically weakened your culture. You basically said, we just pay lip service to this. We don't really mean it. And to me, all the things you talk about in terms of productivity and performance are downstream byproducts of having the right people who are operating on a shared vision, right? Know where they're going, and then ultimately have built a culture of trust. Because the great companies are ones where you're like giving people the benefit of the doubt. You're actually like, cooperating, you're collaborating on things. The terrible cultures are ones where you're like, I don't trust you. I'm backstabbing. It's political. It's all that stuff going on. And that's what culture to me is about. Culture is not about ping pong tables and free beer, right?
That's super interesting. What about the impact of culture when the market goes from hot to cold and how people feel greatly changes? So is the market also a really big consideration when you think of culture? Is that like another pillar that one has to think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you said, Halligan's point, I think, is correct, and like other entrepreneurs, I never think about, I'm going to start a business because it's an up market or a down market. Like you just have an idea that grabs you and you can't let go of it. And if you talk to any of the folks that are in the HR space, basically the products don't change; they just shift the messaging, right? So it's either the markets are really doing well and let's talk about people and culture, or the markets are not doing well and let's talk about productivity. But they're the flip side of the same coin, right? You can't have a shitty culture and shitty employees and have great productivity and great results.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. And Austin, you made a point earlier on our text thread, not the secret one that you and Sam have, but the one with all three of us. Where we were talking about the down market aspect of it. And I actually would say we had our highest NPS, ENPS ever as a company this year. And a part of this is here's where I think becomes a challenge, is because if you're having like hard conversations, we've a lot of us have gone through rifts or layoffs at the beginning of the year, and you have a really strong culture, and then you do it, and the company rebounds and it gets closer together. You have the board conversation around. It's like, well, our culture is really strong. It's like, well, who cares? Like, whatever. And it's a really frustrating feeling as a founder CEO, because we take pride in our culture. We've like these rituals that we've built over time, these people that we've hired. And Doug, just for reference here, Quotafast, my second company, my first company, had the ping pong tables, had the hoverboards, had fireball shots, had a lot of the things that existed in 2012 to 2018, and the culture was amazing. It was awesome. It was so much fun. However, that was we've evolved. My culture is similar. It's the people you hire. I've worked with a lot of those people. Those were all late 20-year-olds, early 30-year-olds. What's happening today? They're all having kids. I've had 12 parental leaves in the last year at my company. So that's like the culture evolves to that. And of course, the pandemic's a part of that, but those values that you have, and for us, like we really think about those in the hiring and the navigate with data, curiosity, and how you think about lean in with empathy. Like those are really important pieces of it. And we do talk about those in our 360 reviews that we have, and like how we talk about the organization. And each year we have awards that have those specific to those values. And they means in times where things are tougher, you kind of lean in on those things. You lean in on those pieces of it. And Austin, I know you and we've talked about companies that are struggling right now to find product market fit as Series B. And like that was a whole part of it. And if they don't have those basic values, then things are going to fall apart at the management team. Things are going to fall apart. And like I lean on those even more today than I ever have as a company previously.
That one was a really interesting situation. So I was having a conversation with a tier one investor who shall not be named, and they were telling me about a Series B organization that they have. And so the organization has learned in this market that what they ended up building was essentially a nice to have, not a must have. And so they have to go back and get true product market fit, trying to build a must-have. Now, they're Series B in terms of where they are from a round perspective, but internally, you would look at that as a late seed, early Series A type of company, right? They just raised at the right time. But the challenge they have is that their culture is quite toxic internally, and customers are unhappy. The culture is toxic, turnover is high. And so now they have to climb this mountain, which feels like an impossible climb for me, at least looking from the outside. And the conversation AJ and I were having was, AJ's like, this is where culture can be an unlock. And I agree. If you have a good culture and you're in that situation, it will be extremely helpful. The thing I think about, though, is that you probably can't have good culture at that point, because culture does get impacted by you trying to like win in a certain way and not winning, right? Like if you try to build this product, take it to market, and it's not working, there's so many difficult conversations. There's so much losing happening that culture is probably very negative over there. And it's rare to find a company in this state with good culture that they can leverage to get out of it. That was the conversation we were having, Doug.
Yeah, I think that doesn't have to be the case, right? I mean, I'm very proud of the cultures I've built and have built here so far at Airspeed. And again, it comes down to the people, it comes down to the vision. And what I like to say is, and this is kind of a, Bezos thing, it's like, be really firm on the vision and be very flexible on the details. And we even talk about all of our products as experiments, right? We're like, hey, here's our hypothesis. Here's what we're going to go to market with. Here's what we're going to go try. And I think because, again, we had the right people, the vision never changed. We did a whole shit ton of work on a beautiful mobile app, right? And a beautiful web experience that we put on the shelf, right? So you basically go to a bunch of engineers and product managers and designers and say, yeah, I know you've been working on this for 9 to 12 months, but by the way, we're just going to mothball it all and we're going to start again, right? And I think we didn't really have much of a blip at all.
But there's a difference there, Doug. So the difference is you're a seed round company who's supposed to be doing that, right? You're at a stage where you're trying to figure out product market fit. As a Series B company, you're not supposed to be doing that. So your investors have given you $70, $80 million across different stages, right? Imagine those board meetings. Those board meetings are not kind, they're not nice, they're not friendly, they're quite tumultuous. When the CEO founder leaves those board meetings, they're going and giving it to the next 4 or 5 people internally, because that's the difference with a company that's seed round and trying to find product market fit, and a company that's Series B and figures out we don't have product market fit.
Well, first of all, if you got into Series B and you don't have product market fit, somebody's made a mistake, and probably your investor, right? And second of all, like I think if you're a good CEO at that stage, you basically realize like, hey, we jumped the gun. Let's cut back let's dramatically scale back on the employees. Let's basically start acting like we're a seed company and have the core team and say, hey, listen, we're going to reset expectations and go there. I think it's an entirely solvable problem as long as you still believe that in the space of the problem space that you're pursuing is an interesting space and there's an opportunity for product market fit there. But yeah, those are not fun conversations in the least, right? It sounds like a CEO is very good at fundraising and didn't do as good a job on the product side.
Well, I mean, Asid's point is going to be, let's say they do have product market fit and they're 10 to 15, 20, but market, there's just a little bit of thrash. They need to go fundraise. And typically what we'll see for these type of companies is that there'll be a CEO swap. So you're going to have this kind of cultural shift and cultural swap that's going to happen. And I think we're going to see we've talked about this openly. We're going to see acceleration of that in the upcoming 12 months. And I would say culture is going to be massively important, but very understated at these companies in a big way. Depending on who's coming into the organization, a lot of these will be first-time CEOs that come in and will have never done anything. They won't be founders themselves. They've never done anything with culture and setting the stage, setting those rituals, setting those things. And so the question will be leaning on the founders, leaning on those rituals, and then thinking about opportunities like the experiments that you're running at Airspeed. What hit me when you were talking is like one of those experiments being introductions. How does someone introduce themselves to a company in today's world? And it's just fascinating. It's like, you have to think, yes, firm on the vision, but these details will matter in some way as you're building that culture of the organization.
Yeah, super. And I think that, like, in the same way that I talked about LinkedIn cascading communications, I think companies have to be that deliberate about cascading culture. And I think, if anything, if COVID taught us anything, it was like made the entire world sensitive to the plight of the remote worker. Because all the problems that we face with remote work, and there's great opportunities and benefits as well, but there's obviously challenges. All those things existed before COVID. We were just sitting in headquarters going like, oh yeah, that's right. It's really inconvenient for the guys in India to be on calls, or like, like somebody moved from floor 15 to floor 13 in the Salesforce tower and I don't see him as much. Like, it all existed. We just suddenly became hyper aware of it. It's not like, we don't tell companies, hey, just buy our software or use our software and you'll have an amazing culture. That's, anybody who does that is full of shit, obviously. What we're trying to basically say is, here's an Iron Man suit. Here's a set of tools for you to help make this stuff a lot easier as a leader or a manager. So to your point, AJ, like, when we were all in person at my last company, we would bring a new employee on. We'd always take them out to lunch, and we'd have our standard set of 5 questions, like, what's your first concert? Like, what do you like to do for fun? I'm going to be surprised to know about you. Most embarrassing moment, shit like that. And the problem about it, even then, was if you weren't in that lunch, you didn't hear the answers. And if you were that employee, you had no idea how everybody else answered that question. So we have a super simple product called Intros. It's just literally a template that's being used by us and, again, thousands of other companies, that just says, here's our standard set of questions. And so you can go in and you automatically get prompted when you join, when you're added to a Slack channel, added to a Slack workspace. You answer those questions. You can scroll and see what everybody else's are. And over time, as you're gathering that data, you can start to do interesting things like, hey, there's 17 other people who are interested in scuba diving, or 5 other people that, play rock music in a band for fun. And that's the way you start building these, other insights that go beyond someone's LinkedIn profile.
It's kind of fascinating. We, for QuotaPath, use, I don't know if it's competitive, so I'm just going to say it's something that's existed for a while in Slack. Donut, you probably have heard of. But we, and the company, it has really interesting stats and does water cooler, and it's great. Like, where would you travel? It's interesting topics, but it's gotten really aggressive. To the point that it's now preemptively scheduling one-on-ones on my calendar with people. It's just like, what the hell? I take advantage of it, but at the same time, I'm just like, okay, like, don't, like, this is a little bit too much. So I'm sure in your experiments, by the way.
Yeah, the product we just released 2 weeks ago is a direct competitor to Donut, and it was in response to exactly that, because I had the same experience, which was like, wow, I'm really getting a lot of spammy, messaging. Yeah. And by the way, the matches seem to be pretty random. So if I meet, I've worked with some people in my company for a decade plus. I don't need to go match with them. So we do a few simple things and leverage LLMs, where we just ask you 2 questions: what kind of people do you want to meet with, and what kind of things do you want to talk about? And we use that to enhance the matches. We make the scheduling easier. And then even when you get matched, you're like, hey, you're going to have this 30-minute like meeting with AJ. Here's 5 things you might want to talk to him about. And AJ, here's 5 things you might want to talk to Doug about based on what you've put in, or your title, or other kinds of things like that. So again, we're trying to make that process feel a little bit more natural. And the thing we've also discovered is even multiple people. Some people are just really nervous about, like, they're shy. They don't want to meet with somebody one-on-one. So if you can make that a group of 3 or 4 people, then that becomes a more natural conversation. So again, like, what I wanted, most of this stuff we built, I just want to build building for myself to solve problems that I have as a leader and a manager. So mine is like, take the Salesforce case. I had 60, 70 people on my team, and I really wanted the button that just says, go set up meetings with people I don't meet with on a regular basis so I can get to know them. That's really what Coffee Talk is.
That's interesting.
Yeah, super interesting.
One of the things that we were all chatting about prior to this was that, can branding impact culture? And so we have AJ, who's just gone through a very stylish rebrand, if I might say so myself.
Sexy. You can use that word.
Sexy.
You can use that word.
We have Sam, who's done it really well in the past as well. Even though I really like the name Revenue Collective, as soon as it went Pavilion, I was like, I get it. Like, it's the right name for the future. And the rebrand was very stylish as well. So AJ, why did you decide to prioritize a rebrand in this market? Obviously, it's a heavy lift, requires time, energy, resources, attention. You prioritized it. Why? And what are where do you feel that the benefits are going to be? Is it going to be internal, external, a little bit of both?
Today's business landscape is full of uncertainty, and succeeding as a go-to-market leader has never been more challenging. Pavilion is here to provide you with the education, support, and resources you need to grow, learn, and unlock your full potential. Join more than 10,000 of the world's leading go-to-market executives in a private membership community designed specifically to fuel your success. Visit joinpavilion.com and use the code TOPLINE20 to get 20% off your membership. That's joinpavilion.com, and the code is TOPLINE20 to get 20% off your Pavilion membership. And now, back to the show.
And also, why did you prioritize it over caring about your employees to the point of this conversation?
I don't think I did. I mean, I think that's actually a part of this. So thanks,
you
Sam.
attend all your donut meetings?
Feeling very targeted right with that one. So first off, I like when our chief marketing officer, Sarah, joined, and Sarah is an amazing person. She was at Taxjar to Stripe, head of marketing there. She was at a company called Cloud into IBM, head of marketing there. She ran the first SaaS business in IBM ever. So like when marketers join, I don't, as a CEO, tend to bucket marketers, but there are people, investors, folks that bucket marketers and like their brand or demand gen or their product marketing, right? And Sarah is like voice of the customer, like super voice of the customer focus. And that's actually how I would bucket her. But when she first joined and she was consulting with us, we talked about this of like, look, where we're headed as a company, and that vision is like really firm. We need to really position QuotaPath to meet our buyer. And like, I have this future vision of where our buyer is headed. And like, we've had this very fun brand for forever. And like, I'm a sales leader. So, sales leaders can't understand comp plans or can't get their teams to understand the comp plan. So let's make this fun for the sales teams and gamification and all of those things. But the way we positioned QuotaPath at that time just didn't really fit what we were hearing in the market and our ICP, frankly. The buyer was shifting, finances coming down. We're hearing all of those things. And so ultimately the jobs to be done by the finance was just like shifting product. Of course, we were hearing that. We ultimately needed to shift how we're talking and how we're seeing. And when I think of just brand in general, it's like that look and feel. And of course, product marketing is a part of that. Of course, demand gen is a part of that. Of course, that whole entire holistic customer journey is a part of that. So I know that it's like your first expectation is like, oh my God, brand, like in today's world, is that where you should allocate dollars? It was actually, no, it was more on the customer journey aspect of it. And it was a 7-month, I got to give a shout out. This is going to be my win of the week. Sam, sorry, I'm preempting this, but to Melanie Taub and our director of brand, who just absolutely knocked it out of the park. She did such a great walkthrough with the management team at our offsite in May, and like went through, here's how we're positioned, here's the market, here's how we're thinking about it, here's the confidence we're going to have, we're going to lead into this smart, we're going to be approachable like we've been, and we're going to be very mindful of what the market looks like. And it just made sense. And that was culturally, we had our best offsite. We started with that, and that helped create this like journey for us. And I would say that like going through that experience, because I've actually never gone through it before. I mean, Trendkite had 7 years. We were just like, we changed the logo once. That was great. But it was just like, we changed the logo because our biggest customer, Edelman, had the same logo, except it was 90 degrees clocked. We're like, oh shit, we got to change our logo. This was actually a big shift and pivot for the organization. And that is what we wanted to represent for the company. And by the way, the momentum and velocity. I had lots and lots of customers reach out to me, but who do you think the number 2 persona to reach out to me was?
Finance, hopefully.
VCs, venture capitalists. Hey, can we invest in QuotaPath?
Oh, really?
I had like 15 outreaches of like, oh my God.
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think this was the thing?
It's a signal to the market. Like in a market where it's challenging and things are like not moving forward, we're leaning into those headwinds in a go-to-market way. And so
at this age, now we'll have a bunch of founders that are just doing rebrands to get some investment.
No, now that we've done it, it's all about pipeline. Don't worry for my board and everyone else that's listening out there.
Chill, guys.
Pipeline.
Sam, you did this as well. Like, how did you decide that it was time to make that shift? And then how did your employees feel at that time when you made it? Like, did it create like energy and an uplift over that?
I think it created a lot of energy because we announced the rebrand in conjunction with our Series A financing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I also did it for a bunch of other reasons that have since become less relevant. So at the time, I had these world conquering ambitions that we were going to build community for HR leaders and for finance leaders. And that was all part of sort of the ebullience and the euphoria of 2021, where everybody thought that their companies could do everything for everybody. And since then, we've redoubled our focus on go-to-market executives and CEOs, and the name change has become less relevant, meaning like we didn't really need to, because we could have stayed Revenue Collective and done what we needed to do. I still think that, like, I think brand change is different than a name change. Name change is hard because URLs have to change and a bunch of other stuff has to change. Brand change you can use all your old, you can use the same URL, use the same domain, etc. I still think Pavilion's a bigger name.
Yeah.
A bigger, like, it sounds like it's worth more. I don't know what that is worth in the world, but
I think so.
But
because it creates long-term optionality as well. Like if you wanted to add those things in the future, you could. Like that, there's a world in which you could do that now.
Doug, where did the name Airspeed come from, and how did you think about it?
So I've always had a rule of naming is like no more than 2 syllables and as generic as possible. Right. So it's kind of like, so we could pivot the shit out of a business and still like keep the umbrella term, and no one's going to go like, oh, well, you're, fuzzy monkey, socks, or whatever it is.
Culture Slack application.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're Get Airspeed right now. We just got airspeed.ai. If I've got $1 million sitting in my back pocket, we can get airspeed.com.
Only $1 million? That's how much the domain spotter? I think it's a little bit more.
Yeah, it probably is more. He'll probably listen to this podcast and jack it up. Yeah. So I just shot myself in the foot. But but yeah, I mean, for me, it was, it was, hey, listen, I'm going to go start a company. I think it's going to be generally around this. This is a fun 2-syllable name. I like things that go fast. It alludes to cloud and speed, and okay, that's good. Yeah.
Did anything that Samurai said, just in terms of like how we're thinking about brand and how it relates to culture, did anything either resonate or that you disagreed with?
No, I mean, I'm generally not a fan of logo changes for logo change sake. So if a marketer comes to me and says, "Hey, listen, we need to update the logo," that's a heavy lift, and I'm like, to what purpose? I think like the Pavilion change was a great example of even if it's something that Revenue Collective could have held, I think Pavilion is a much better name, a much broader landscape in which to paint over the next, 5 to 10 years. So I think that's a great example. And listen, there is energy and momentum that you bring to the team when you're like, hey, we're basically having a bigger name that helps represent not only what we are today, but what we could go become. So I'm a fan of those kind of changes, but I used to I've had some marketers who are like, oh, we need to update the logo and refresh it. And I just looked and they've actually refreshed it because it was so bad. But if you remember the old Checkpoint logo, it looked like it was drawn by a 4th grader. It was like, like lots of lines and dots. It was the worst piece of shit in the world. And they were already a multi-billion-dollar company. So I was like, I would just always point them to that and say, please tell me why I need to change.
I have a question, Doug, about competition. We were talking with amongst us. Halligan wrote this idea. He wrote these like 20 lessons from being a CEO. And one of them, he said, watch your competitors, but don't follow them. And then meanwhile, Asad has said, that's great. But Meta basically, well, first of all, Microsoft copied Internet Explorer from Netscape. Facebook has stolen everything they could from, whatchamacallit? Snapchat, TikTok, etc., and they seem to be doing just fine. What's your perspective on how much attention? And meanwhile, we just brought up Donut, and you mentioned that like Coffee Talk is in some sense an improved version of a different idea. How do you think about competition? How do you think about, particularly Because sometimes I would imagine, and you've dealt with this way more than me, AJ and Asad have, sometimes you're pitching an idea or talking to a direction of a business to a VC or an investor, and investors sometimes place way more emphasis on competition than founders do. And they're, well, you can't do that. Google's going to do that, or you can't do that. LinkedIn's going to do that. And the reality is that most of the time, if you sat in those ELT meetings, you'd realize that they've got way bigger fish to fry than whatever piece of functionality you're working on. But how do you think about it? Do you think about, does it impact you? Or are you of the Halligan camp, or are you saying, just curious on what your perspective is?
Yeah, I'm kind of the Halligan camp. I mean, listen, there's I don't know who to attribute this. There's some quote about like good artists borrow, great artists steal. And so like, if there's a damn good idea, like I think, what Instagram did to Snapchat, kudos, right? It's the way to go do it. Like, that's a good feature. We should just go borrow that. We should go create our own spin on it. That's great. If that's all you're doing, you're never going to be a leader, right? If you're just constantly saying, what is someone else doing? And let me kind of fast follow their features, you're not going to win in the market. So you've got to have your own sense of conviction, your own vision, your own sense of how certain products get done. And I think it's also stripping things down. I think that, you look at a lot of products in a lot of spaces where people are just like, have their monster chart of, we have checkboxes in this row and they have checkboxes in that row. What really matters to me in building great products is stripping it down to, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and how do you kind of widen the aperture enough to go, okay, given the technologies I have at hand right now, given my understanding where the market has evolved from when those guys built their product, because oftentimes they built it, 5, 10, 15 years ago, what can I do better? What can I do different? So I'm never a fan of just saying like, oh, what did they do? Let me make sure I check every box. That's a failing strategy for me. But if there's a good idea and I think they've done it well, I have no shame in stealing something like that.
I think that's the point, right? Because when I read that, and Jason Lemkin had a similar post and said something as well, very similar to that as well. Initially, I was like, yeah, I feel this way, because when I think back to my journey, I started our executive search practice in 2016. And at the time, you have these incumbents that have been doing executive search while horse and carriage was the way that you got around, right? So like, if I tried to be them, I was going to lose no matter what. So I had to think quite differently to try and scratch some market share away. And it worked really well for us. Like, we built a really good practice and did well. But then I started challenging my thinking, and that's when Meta came up to me. And Meta uses the word inspiration. So they now don't hide from this. They're like, yes, we look outside. We don't think we have a monopoly on good ideas. And if we see somebody doing something exceptionally well, that will inspire us to do something. And we're not afraid to do that. And if you think about legendary businesses, right, they are one of the most legendary businesses out there. And then you can see other businesses like Slack did kind of feel like they had closed out the outside world and was so focused on this product-led growth approach that hurt them when they had to get into the enterprise. And if they had a broader point of view and challenged their thinking around PLG into the enterprise, maybe they would have had a little bit more momentum, and Microsoft Teams would not have come and just taken all that market share away from them so easily. So I think you hit the nail on the head, which is that you have to have a lot of original ideas, especially around the product. But you shouldn't be afraid to look at competitors if they're doing something really, really good, either from a product strategy perspective or tactically. Like, there's so many interesting things people do in their go-to-market motion that it would be ridiculous not to take inspiration from.
Yeah, but Austin, the thing that you're saying is that, I mean, the companies that you're citing are all category kings in their category at that point in time. So like, the truth of the matter is, if you're a startup, you're a Series A, Series B, I think it goes back to differentiation. You have to, like, absolutely everything you have to do is innovation to get to that point where you can be. I was listening to the David Senra Founders podcast on Sam Walton, and that guy stole everything, literally everything.
Yeah.
But
look what he built.
He was, but he did it in a way that it made sense, in that he wasn't afraid of failure, and not everything worked. It was all experiments for him. He didn't have an ego about it, and he was vulnerable to admit that this wasn't going to work. But also similar to Amazon, in a space where you're like a commodity, where it's a race to the bottom, you have to do things like that to just along the supply chain, just to okay, this is working for this store, we're going to try it, but we're going to do all of these things together in tandem.
think about it on the early stage side. So once ChatGPT comes out, or Anthropic and all these others, they have to then take inspiration from that and be like, okay, these guys knocked it out of the fucking park. This is the way to put this out into the world. And these are Series A, Series B, Series C stage firms. They have to put their own tilt on it, right? It'll have some uniqueness. You can't just take it for its entirety, but you can't hide away from that inspiration in that moment.
No, and you mentioned two companies, or two products, Slack and Teams. Slack wasn't the first one to market, right? They just basically took something where Atlassian had a great product, but it was a free trial motion, and so Slack did a much better interface, a very high performance client. They did the hey, only pay for who's actually using the product, which was again pretty radical at the time, and allowed people to feel more safe going wall to wall on things. And I don't know, a $27 billion exit isn't a bad, bad outcome for a company.
I think
I'd be okay with that.
I could barely live on 27 billion.
Yeah, I could do okay with that. And then, and also kudos to Microsoft. And by the way, Microsoft, I love them, but they also overstate the shit out of everything. So don't believe the Teams numbers for a second, because they bundle it with every copy, every PC, everything that's out there. But nonetheless, they have done a fantastic job of fast following Slack. And Slack is still growing like a weed, right? Slack is doing amazing, right? But Microsoft basically said, we know what our sweet spot is, which are people who are actually using Microsoft Office. And if you talk to most of them, they're still using it more for Zoom than they are Slack, many of them. And they don't even understand the kind of the messaging piece of it. They just view it as a conferencing tool.
Well, Doug, actually, you bring up a really interesting point that you're very well suited for. What do you think Salesforce does with Slack? Like, what's the end game there?
Well, I can tell you what I hope they do with it. I don't know what they will do with it. And I think that the hard part is I think they've already missed the boat to do what Microsoft did with LinkedIn, which was, hey, Stuart, you've got an amazing team, an amazing culture. You tell us how we can help you. But they've obviously had turnover in the executive team. They've started inserting Microsoft, Salesforce employees. They've started, focusing a lot of the efforts on how do you have the apps go there.
They have an amazing culture at that point, though. Like, wasn't it getting a little bit tumultuous at Slack as well, because they were struggling into the enterprise, and that was creating a lot of anxiety internally, and was part of the reason why they were looking for an out?
Yeah, struggling is an interesting question. Again, a public company that's growing very rapidly. I think they were transitioning into enterprise. When they started, if you remember, Stuart was like, we don't need salespeople.
Yeah.
This will just sell itself. It's a PLG motion.
Oh, shit.
We were amused by how many salespeople are at Slack now. But if you looked at the time they went public at their S1, most of their business were people swiping a credit card, right? They had a handful of, most of their revenue was people still like, it's the bottoms up motion. If you look at that today, the vast majority of their revenue are enterprise customers. It's top down sale. It's all on an enterprise grid. It's there. Although again, if you look at just the volume of users, it's still this bottom up feeder system coming from there. So I think, like any company, they had, challenges that were scaling, but they were making that transition and continue to make that transition pretty successful. To the original question of what does Salesforce do? I think first of all, Brent did it's a brilliant acquisition, because I think that Salesforce has long touted the 360 view where all your data comes together. And speaking of brands that didn't shouldn't be the right name for a company, Salesforce, with everything else they do, but somehow it still works. It was like Salesforce has grown through acquisition. So they basically had all these little islands that didn't really talk to each other. And they tried all this different middleware to kind of piece it all together. The brilliance of Slack is it's not just a messaging app. It's one of the things that Stuart said early on that I thought he was full of shit on that turned out to be true. One was Slack's going to take over email. And if you talk to a lot of companies, especially companies with a lot of, digital natives, people under 35, they don't check email anymore. They check it maybe once a month or once every couple of weeks. They live on Slack. And so Slack has really become that messaging interface. And the second thing is Slack taught us all how to talk to apps through a messaging user interface. And so he was like, messaging user interfaces of the future. So what we used to talk about before I left Salesforce was, and the Slack acquisition had been announced, we talked about thin tasks and thick tasks. And so what I think Slack is brilliant for is a thin task. So you imagine, saying, hey, update this opportunity stage to 4, or tell me when this deal's supposed to close, or adjust the price. All that stuff should just be a simple messaging interface. And you can do that across every single app, ultimately in the Salesforce ecosystem. So it becomes this umbrella layer above it all. And then if you're going to go do a full-blown pipeline review, you're probably not going to do that in Slack. Then you jump into Sales Cloud and go do that there. So I think that ultimately, if Salesforce is successful with the Slack acquisition the way I hope they are, it will become the connective tissue across all their apps.
Thin and thick. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And it's a great, I mean, the other thing that I don't think people have realized, and we're really excited because we're doing, obviously, like everybody else, a ton of stuff around AI. We actually hired AI engineers when we started the company. Kind of crazy idea. But Slack taught everybody how to talk to an app via messaging interface. Look at ChatGPT. It is talking to an app through a messaging interface. So what we're building into all our apps is just imagine being able to use a /AI command where you can say, who hasn't gotten much recognition in the last quarter? Or, what are the next 5 work anniversaries coming up I should pay attention to? And ultimately, we think about this as we call it PQL, people query language, right? Should be able to ask anything of your organization that you want to know through an interface. And Slack for Slack and then Teams in the future, that kind of interface will be a great wedge for us into teaching people that behavior.
That's awesome. Doug, it's been an absolute joy having you on today. Sorry that I couldn't be more engaged. I was dealing with dog issues in this hotel room that I'm in. But if folks if they want to use Airspeed and you've got this whole family of apps, what's the best way for folks to sort of take a peek at it and figure out if they want to become customers or users?
Yeah. So right now we're still in the early access period, so it's free for the rest of this year. Any of the apps, they can go to getairspeed.com or find us in the Slack app store and search for Airspeed. And I'm just d@getairspeed.com if people want to email me any feedback directly.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, and great talking to you. Great
Thank
seeing
you,
you.
Doug. That was great.
Yeah.
Bye.
That was very good.
That was fun.
Oh, we have to remove you now. We're wrapping up the show. We'll see you.
Okay.
We'll see you later. Yeah. Get out of here. Get out of here. No, we're back to a private party.
It's kind of like the conversation that we started with the HubSpot person, just like yelling,
Denise?
"Oh, this is awkward." We're ending the episode the same way we started the episode.
Awkwardly. Ozzy was running around my hotel room the entire time we were recording, but we don't have wee pads down, and he's very self-conscious. And so he's like, I don't know what what am I supposed to do?
My bladder is a pea size.
His penis is so small; it's a tiny little micro penis.
This was the sophomore. You said sophomoric. Here we are.
I'm just commenting. That's just a statement of fact. I'm not making a. Anyway, really quickly, I've got my next meeting in our Zoom waiting room. Wins of the week. AJ, you mentioned your brand marketer.
Yeah, I'll give Milani a shout out. She did a phenomenal job. She deserves a great shout out, and love all the things that we're doing at QuotaPath, and the new brand refresh is great.
I really like the contrast of the greens. I found it very good.
Greens is very hot right now.
Greens all the rage. Forget the blues.
Yeah, the blues.
Austin?
I read something super interesting last night as I was putting the docket together. And so a team of neuroscientists at Berkeley reconstructed Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall using brain activity from 29 patients. Those 29 patients were made to listen to the song while they got brain surgery. And then after that, they reconstructed the song using brain activity, which I just think is absolutely insane because it puts us one step forward to being able to create technology that can give people the ability to communicate properly back. We still have very archaic technology when it comes to that. you guys don't know this, but when I was younger, I had a really bad lisp. And a bad lisp is not like not being able to talk, but I know the challenges that come with having communication problems. And the fact that we're getting into a world where people will have the ability to communicate when they were born without it, or they lost it because of an accident, and they'll get it back to a really good level, is just really cool for me to see. And it can also make you think about things like doing business at other parts of the world and being able to have fluent conversations with people that are in different languages. It's just super cool. So I was very inspired when I read that.
That is extremely, extremely cool.
Interesting.
Wow. All right. Well, who do I have to give a shout out to? I'm going to give a shout out to the Lionesses of England, who just beat Australia. It's going to be an England Spain World Cup final. And England has suffered a lot of heartbreak and a lot of loss on their journey to a World Cup title. And I hope they finally claim it this time. So I'm rooting for England, my brothers and sisters and friends across the pond.
There we go.
This has been another episode of Top Line. For me, Sam Jacobs, CEO of Pavilion, AJ Bruno, CEO of QuotaPath, Asset Ahmad, CEO of Sales Talent Agency, signing off. We only had one person post from last week. That was Jesse Shipman. We're making a 15. We had two?
Two people post.
Who was the second? How did
some guy from Morgan Stanley, but I saw a second post.
Oh, amazing. Let's go, Morgan Stanley, enterprise customer. From Morgan Stanley. We're moving up market. But
I got 10 messages about cryotherapy, though.
Oh, really? Well, I just did cryotherapy. I can attest that it is indeed exists. I can't test whether it works, but I can tell you that it exists. We'll talk to you next week, folks. Thanks, everybody. Give us five stars on the iTunes store. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
This episode was brought to you by Close, which helps organizations improve their sales win rates, build better products, and consistently uncover the real reasons they win and lose business. Visit freebuyerinterview.com to learn more. Closed, freebuyerinterview.com to learn more. Win-loss analysis is incredibly important. So thank you for listening, and thanks to Closed for sponsoring the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Top Line. To learn more about the trends, news, and developments impacting the world of B2B SaaS, head to joinpavilion.com, where more than 10,000 of the world's top go-to market leaders go to achieve and unlock their full professional potential.